Hi, church. I hope you're doing well. Over the last 2 weeks or so, in my devotions, I've been looking at a few of Christ's post-resurrection appearances. That is, these are the times when the apostles encountered Jesus after he rose from the grave. That was my plan to kind of continue looking at some of these leading up to Ascension Day. And then we'll turn our focus to Pentecost. And from there, we'll look at some of the other high points in the book of Acts. Now, we're probably not going to go verse by verse, but my plan is to cover enough of the book of Acts to give us a good lay of the land. Now, I want to continue today where we left off last week. This is Christ's third post-resurrection appearance. It's right at the tail end of what's commonly known as Peter's reinstatement. So this is John 21, picking up in verse 18. Jesus says, "Very truly I tell you, you used to fasten your belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands. Someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He, this is Jesus, said this to indicate the kind of death by which he, Peter, would glorify God. And after this, he, again, Jesus, said to him, "Follow me." Now, most scholars there's kind of a consensus that John wrote his gospel last. It's hard to get much consensus on when he wrote his gospel, but it's more than likely that John wrote after Peter's death. And Peter died in the persecution under the Roman Emperor Nero. That makes sense why John would include this. I mean, following the deaths of so many of the early church leaders like Peter, Paul, many among the Christian community, they were shaken, right? They were wondering, how could God let this happen? I mean, think today, if John Piper, Matt Chandler, and Tim Keller were all killed in the same year, all martyred for their faith. Can you imagine like what we would do? In telling this part of the story, John is encouraging the early church. This didn't come as a surprise. Jesus told us that this was coming. I think the more interesting question is, why tell Peter? And why tell him he was going to be martyred? Let me ask you, if you could know how you were going to die, would you want to know? Well, let's think about it this way. In John 13:37, like Peter's just full of bravado, right? Jesus is saying, "Where I go, you cannot go." And Peter says, "Lord, why can't I follow you now?" Right? And then here it is. I will lay down my life for you. We know how that turns out, right? In that moment, Peter believed he was the kind of leader who could look fear in the face and just not flinch. Right now, on the other side of the resurrection, it's as if Jesus is saying, "Peter, you might not have known what you're talking about, but you were right. Peter, you will lay down your life for me." Following Peter's failure, it's hard to ever imagine he would ever like bang his chest and say, "Lord, I'll die for you" again, right? But this isn't Peter full of hot air. This is Jesus, quietly, confidently, on the other side of failure, assuring him, "Yes, Peter, you will." And what do you think it was like for Peter to hear that? Jesus had predicted that Peter would deny him 3 times, right? And he was right. You want to bet against Jesus on this one? Probably not. And we've also got to think about it from another perspective. I mean, Jesus, like I said, is standing on the other side of resurrection. Rome and the religious elite had done their worst, and he rose from the grave. He's telling Peter, they're going to do the same to you. You don't need to fear them. I have already overcome them. And through Rome, the principalities and powers of the enemies are going to do their worst. And through their actions and your faithfulness, not faithlessness, it will lead to God's glory. Someday, Peter, you will stand on this side as well. And what we're going to see in the weeks to come is that this courage and faithfulness isn't something that Peter works on. It's not something he develops. It's a gift, right? It's a gift of the Spirit. The difference we'll see in Peter's life that enables him to lay down his life where he once sought to protect it is the Holy Spirit. As Paul says in 2 Timothy 1:7, "For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, It gives us power, love, and self-discipline. May you live by the Spirit this week, and whatever you do, whatever you face, may it be to the glory of God.